So, kind of a key concept in animation is timing and space. Timing and spacing. Okay, so let's make a little square here and move the pivot. Ah, see that's interesting. Okay, so if I have this rectangle selected and I move the pivot, it's the pivot inside this rectangle. So remember, shape layers are just containers, right? And in this container, there's all these shapes and they have their own transforms and pivots. And as I was saying, the easier thing to do in the beginning here is just to kind of use one shape per layer. Right? So that's just a good note. If you make a shape and you try to move the pivot right away, it's actually selecting one of the shapes. And you can kind of see that this is got a different selection than that. So anyway, made my little square, move the pivot over to the square. Okay, so then we'll do P, set a keyframe. I'm going to do it the slick way, Alt P, and then I'm going to move to 1 second. And if I want to move forward and backwards in time, I can just hit Function and the up and arrow keys. I'm using a Mac laptop. So I go to a second, and I'm going to move the cube over to the other side of the canvas. All right, and let's just turn. Second. So if I select this thing, we'll see all these little, and what these dots represent. So the big squares at the end there, those are the keyframes. And then each dot is the position of the square on each of those frames. So it's a way to visualize the movement over time. All right, so timing and spacing. So timing is where the keyframes are positioned in the timeline. And if I move these keyframes further apart, I'm making the same action take longer, which slows it down. Right? It's timing. And if I do the reverse, I move it from a second to closer. I'm going to take the same amount of movement and happen in fewer frames and speed it up, right? So if you decrease the time of the an action, you increase the velocity. And if you increase the time of the action, you decrease the velocity. And even just like here, like if I just play this, that's one kind of thing. And if I do this, it's faster, right? You could say it's more energetic, it's lighter. Whereas if I move something further back in time, it's slower, but it also feels heavier and more lethargic. Just these two keyframes start to give a sense of meaning, right? All right, so that's timing. The other component to this is spacing, right? So I could leave my keyframes at 1 second, right? And I could also decrease the amount of movement, the amount of distance traveled by the square. So that's spacing. So I can, if I decrease the distance traveled over the same amount of time, I'm reducing the velocity and decreasing the speed. And of course, I can do the reverse, right? So, animation is really the study of timing and spacing, right? And the first kind of thing to do is to have these kind of key positions, key moments in time, and then get those happening where you want, right? Then let's say, okay, that's kind of what we want. Then we start looking at the way the computer is interpolating between these two keys. So the timing is 1 second, but the spacing doesn't need to be linear, right? These two keyframes are linear. It doesn't need to be exactly the same distance traveled in each frame. We can manipulate. So I'm gonna move this forward in time. going to go from 1 second to 2 second, and then make my timeline. I just hit end there. So it's a 3-second edit, holds for a second, moves, stops. Okay, so like I said, these are linear keyframes. There are other kinds of keyframes. For example, if I right click on this, we see other kinds of keyframe options. So let's do the hold. So what hold does is it basically holds the position until a new value happens, and then it just jumps to that next value. It almost like teleports. All right. Another option we have is easy ease. Okay. So easy ease, you can ease in, ease out, or both. Right. So a good way to remember this is to say easy ease in to the keyframe, or easy ease out of the keyframe, right? Because it can get confusing to know, like, do I want to do in and out? So let's just grab this keyframe here and set it to easy ease out. And so you'll see the little shape of it change. I made this like little C shape. So let's just see what happened. So now it accelerates and then stops. So easy eases are like really foundational to animation, because this linear movement that we have by default is not really how most things happen. If you think about like just about anything, a ball, a car, it has to, when it goes from static to in motion, it has to accelerate and decelerate. So easing out of and into a keyframe is a more natural motion, all else being, equal. So here I'm going to ease out and then ease in, right? This will be easy ease out of the keyframe, easy ease into the keyframe, hit play, and do that. And so let's just compare, right? So if I duplicate this layer here, let's say I wanted to move everything up in Y, but keep everything else the same. So to do that, if you grab both keyframes, right? If you select them both, and we're going to turn on a little grid, and we grab it with both selected, it'll move everything. So that can be a nice way to reposition items on the frame, on the page, on the canvas, but keep the underlying motion. So we're gonna just compare here. We're gonna change this. So if I command click it, it goes from easy ease out to easy ease in, and then on the top one it's linear. So let's just play this. So the thing that's interesting, right? We're talking about timing and spacing, is both squares have identical timing. They are in the same position in X on frame 1 and 2, but the one on the bottom has a different interpolation, different spacing, and so it has different movement. All right, and animation is, like I said, a combination of the position of keyframes, the amount of change, and then most importantly, the way you interpolate between those keyframes. And for this first project, we're just going to look at ease in, ease out, linear, and hold. But as we progress, we're going to get into the nitty gritty of the interpolation between two different keys. One other kind of interesting thing is if I grab this and I move it, you can see it's showing me the path, right? And we set up our preferences to keep it linear, right? So what if we wanted it to kind of be smoothly kind of come in to the top and then down underneath? So what we would have to do is manipulate this path. There's other kind of ways of dealing with this, but for now we're just going to say we're just going to manipulate this path almost like it's a Bezier in Illustrator. And bigger. And now it's smooth. What if we wanted to have the square orient itself to the path? So I guess what we could do is we could set some rotation keyframes. And as it as it moves along the path, we could animate the rotation, and maybe in some instances that's what we want to do. But um, often there's an easier way to do this. So if I grab this, my layer here, and I go layer, transform, auto orient. Now it should happen. See, follow. All right. One other thing. Let's say we wanted to retime these, right? So I can move this over here, but what if I wanted this to just be right in the middle? So I could reposition it, but there's if you hold Alt, you can grab either end and then keep the keyframe, however many keyframes are in the middle, proportional to their original release. All right. So that's just a little bit more analysis of